You're listening to Free-ish in Higher Ed. Hey y'all, welcome back to Free-ish in Higher Ed. I'm Chelsea, and today I'm joined by Alisha Small, founder and CEO of Living Fulfilled Coaching and Consulting. She's a certified personal development coach, mentor, and advocate working with youth, adults, and organizations to turn growth into real change. So to get us started, Alisha, would you mind introducing yourself and telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and the work that you're doing?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Again, I'll just piggyback off of that beautiful introduction. My name is Alisha Small. I am the CEO and founder of Living Fulfilled Coaching and Consulting, which is a full-service personal development coaching and consulting firm. I work with schools, nonprofit organizations, and businesses to do staff leadership training, personal development training, and teaching our youth and adults how to use personal growth as a catalyst for change and productivity and living your most fulfilled life. Right now, I do a lot of independent consulting and workshop facilitation. I'm also in the advocacy space. I've gotten bitten by the advocacy bug. It's still new to me, but I do some federal and state advocacy as it relates to workforce development policy. I also do advocacy work for students with disabilities, working with parents as well of students with disabilities and helping them through the IEP process, understanding their rights and how to build relationships with their school. And I also advocate for student parents, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I do a lot of advocacy for student parents. I am a former student parent, and I have such a love for that population, which I was previously a part of, and we'll get deeper into it in the episode. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being here. Wow, you do a lot. And I love the way that you're using your voice to uplift other parents and families who might not really know how to navigate those systems. So thank you for showing up in those spaces and helping out those who need a voice. But I wanted to get into why you're here. So tell me about what your experience was like as a non-traditional student, as a parenting student. What was that like for you?
Going back to school as a non-traditional student at 36, I'm 41 now, but at the time I went, it was during this pandemic and it was in the beginning of the pandemic. So everybody knows how hectic of a time that was. So I have 3 children. I'm the mom of 3 beautiful children. And at that time they were, because it was the beginning of the pandemic, they were still homeschooled. I just did a big move from Brooklyn, New York to Maryland, and I was in walking distance of Montgomery College. The first year that I moved, they didn't have any scholarships in place for the coaching certification program that I wanted to go in to build my coaching and consulting business. The following year, they had some scholarships in place because of the pandemic, and I went. Honestly, I'll be fully transparent. I had an unheard of experience for a student parent at 36 with 3 children. But even more so, a student parent at 36 with 3 children in a non-traditional student.
Right.
Really short story, when I enrolled in the coaching certification program, I also just surfing on the internet, I found out about a great leadership development program called MC Leads at Montgomery College. And I applied hesitantly, though, because I was just like, I'm 36. I need to, like most student parents or non-traditional students, like get in and get out,
Right.
and I said, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. And at that time, I didn't know that program was only for credit students. And so I interviewed, I got in, there was some type of clerical error. I got in by accident and they didn't check to see if I was a credit student or a non-credit student. And by the time that they figured out, I was almost done with the program. I was ready to graduate from the program. And so my facilitator, who's my mentor to this day, Dr. Kimberly Jones, she said, you know what, I'm going to have to take the fall for it. I'm not going to put you out. You're phenomenal. And from that leap of faith, from just having the courage to go back to school as a non-traditional student and then applying for that program, my life changed tremendously. I had a unheard of experience. And what I mean by unheard of, like a lot of my mentors that I have today came from that leadership development program. I'm still connected to the school. Opportunities in and outside of the school. I've been on the team to write blogs for the school. I've been a part of the new president, Dr. Williams, his inauguration, standing in as representation for workforce and development students. I've been on the student council. I got into advocacy and opportunities with National Skills Coalition and Aspen Institute, which I'm still working with them to this day through Montgomery College. So again, unheard of. And so I had a great experience.
That definitely is an unheard of experience. And honestly, it's so cool how that led you into your business and now all the powerful advocacy work that you're doing. I'm really curious though about the mentorship aspect of this. How were you able to build lasting relationships with mentors? What was your experience like with that?
So I talk about this a lot. So when I moved to Maryland and I went to Montgomery College, it was just me and my children. I didn't have a network. I didn't have friends. I didn't have family. So it was really important for me to use the skills that I built up over time, invested in my own personal development. And it took a lot of courage,
Yeah,
a vulnerability, self-awareness, knowing who I was, believing in who I was, and truly understanding that there's more people out there for you than against you. And and also harnessing my skills and knowing how to network, how to cultivate authentic relationships. That's something that I'm passionate about. I love human connection and having relationships. And I leaned on those skills. And I honestly, I just asked, can you mentor me? Right? Asking for help, right?
right.
Leaning on my self-awareness skills, my advocacy skills for myself, and my communication skills. Can you help me? Can you mentor me? And one of the things that I'll say to any student, parents, also younger students as well, you'll be surprised by how many people are willing to mentor you and to help you. They're actually flattered by it as well. And there's so many people that are servant leaders. Their passion and their core values are to serve, and they are willing to pour back into you. So all you have to do is ask. And I can guarantee you could come back and let me know. I
Yeah.
can guarantee you it'll be a yes.
Yeah, and I think you made several really strong points about using your skills and asking for help. I think a lot of people will relate to that. And speaking of support, I wanted to talk about the Real College curriculum. I think it's such a great tool for institutions to be able to support non-traditional students. What has your experience been with that?
Yeah. Again, I could never pronounce her last name, so I call her Dr. Jabet. Another one of my mentors from Montgomery College, she got this opportunity and she reached out to me and she said, "Hey, I think that you would be awesome for this, representation for this." And when I learned more about the curriculum that was being built to educate higher education institutions on how to better serve student parents, I said, absolutely. One of the things that I love about this curriculum and the people that created this curriculum, which was also mind blowing to me because I'm 41. So when I started community college, I was 19. I didn't have my first son until 21, but I was still in school then. And there was no such thing as student parents. So
Right.
when I started to get into advocacy, I remember sitting in this room full of people who were passionate about making the college experience better for student parents, making sure they were informed and educated, and also their leadership teams were informed and educated. I was just like, wow, like really? We have like a lot of people that are really serious about this. I immediately got on board and so one of the things that I love about this curriculum is and the people that created it is that they really understand the power of student involvement. And it's simple. Who can better tell you what student parents need than the actual student parents, right?
Right.
It's simple, but it's not.
Exactly.
And how powerful having a student parent or student parents at the table when these decisions are being made, laws are being made, policies are being made about the people that they affect. And so, again, amazing curriculum, amazing set of individuals, and it was just a great experience.
Yes, I also wanted to touch on something you said about it's simple, but it's not, because with my involvement with student government, I found in the advocacy work I've done here in higher ed in Texas, when I got into these spaces with legislators, I was like, they're not going to care what I have to say. That was my thought process going into it. But when I captivated them and they were like all ears and so open and it was so well received, I was like, it's almost like they've never talked to a student before. That was kind of the vibe that I was getting. And I realized, wow, students are not really typically involved in these processes. And it really shocked me. And so I think this is such a great way to kind of open the door for those conversations and help work towards real solutions, because identifying some of the areas where support is lacking is one thing, but I think it's really so beautiful to have these solutions. I think that's where the real power and impact is with Real Colleges. It's presenting solutions on how to support your students. And that's something they need in higher ed. They're always asking, well, how can we have the data. We have the data, but it doesn't give always the full picture. And I feel like Real College fills in a lot of those gaps.
And I'm happy you said that. Another unique quality about Real College is that this is not a typical curriculum. But you go in, even digitally, you go in and you read, and like you said, see a bunch of data and you read. This is a documentary style curriculum, so you get to actually see the real lives of student parents, what traditional student looks like, right? And it's not what it used to be, the normal 17, 18-year-old coming straight out of high school, no life experiences. No, our traditional student looks like a 36-year-old mom of three who
Mm-hmm.
is trying to rebuild a business after a loss in COVID, and they may be experiencing some financial difficulties. If you look at the curriculum, you'll see the life of a single dad, right, who also went to Montgomery College, and you see, these different faces and these people, these student parents that come from different walks of life and what they deal with beyond the data. That is what I advocate for. I am a certified personal development coach, and I always talk about through my own experience, when we talk about servicing the whole student on a holistic level, we can't just rely on the data, right? Through data, you may find out that, okay, you can identify who's a student parent, how many children they have, what age range, right? And what basic needs they may need, which that is absolutely important, because if you don't have your basic needs, you're not thinking about getting your education, right?
Right.
But how do you find out that you have a student parent that may have children that have special needs,
Hmm.
and they're also experiencing, you may have a student parent that's going through a divorce, or you may have a student parent that lost a spouse, or just recently had a death in their family, or these are real situations that are going through domestic violence. That's not in the data, right?
Right.
So that's through building relationship and
Hmm.
personal development, making sure that your institution, the environment is a safe, inclusive place, that they feel safe enough to come to their professor, or if they have a designated person in leadership to say, hey, I'm going through this rough time. Where can I get the resources, that I need? Because that is the gap, right? How do we fill that gap? That could be the gap between someone staying in college and finishing versus the story that you hear many a times where, it took me 10 years. Like I started college and life happened. What is life though? Right? And they couldn't, I remember being 19 and my father got incarcerated, and I left school. I didn't have anybody to go to and tell them, listen, this is what I'm going through, and I need help.
Right.
How can I get the help that I need and stay in school?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that, it's not like a cookie cutter solution. Each student's needs, my needs are going to be different than the next student. And I think that's also something that when, people that are making these decisions and policy in these institutions oftentimes are looking for a one size fits all solution. And I think what
Yeah.
Real College highlights is that each student has very individual, different needs, but they are all important. And if we want to, help people get their education, we definitely need to facilitate them being able to access support and resources. So, yeah, I wanted to pivot into your coaching because, where the overlap is with that and your advocacy in higher education. What does that look like with your coaching and your advocacy and kind of how things all kind of come together?
Yeah. So how my personal development coaching and advocacy overlap with personal development, which you might hear it like different terms, personal growth or soft skills. I really focus on, they call them soft skills, but they're so critical, right? And these critical skills is something that a lot of individuals, whether you're talking about youth or high level leadership, because I've worked with both, they lack or they may struggle, right? And we're talking about self awareness, we're talking about healthy communication, we're talking about conflict resolution, we're talking about emotional intelligence,
Mm.
and how these key skills, who you are as a person. I got into this work because I found that we have a lot of programs that tell you what to do, like the logistics. You have to do this to get this job, or you have to do this to be in this profession or this major, but we really don't talk about who you have to become and the skills that you need and the habits that you have to show up in whatever field that you're in. Personal development is for everyone. And so whether you're a police officer or you work at McDonald's, how do you treat people? How do your core values and beliefs overlap with what you do on an everyday basis? How do you resolve conflict? Right? I come from a place to where one of the worst neighborhoods in Brooklyn where conflict resolution is not a thing, right? People are dying
Right.
because we're not aware of ourselves, our own emotions. We lack a certain level of empathy, right? Being able to see someone else's perspective and put yourself in their shoes so that one, I understand myself and my emotions. I can read the room and I understand someone else's emotions and I can communicate that effectively, and how that overlaps with my advocacy. Like for example, for students with disabilities, when I'm working with parents of students of disabilities, as a mom, I have two boys that have IEPs, and I've sat in IEP meetings and I had an advocate. Right. I was fortunate enough, my sister, Dr. Nicole Anthony, who's a special educator for over 20 years and an advocate for over 10. And I have an advocate next to me and sitting at the table with the team, and I'm supposed to be a part of the team, and totally overlooked, totally dismissed, totally just felt isolated and at times intimidated. And I had to harness my skills. And that in the beginning of my journey, my oldest son, who's 19 now, he was in third grade. So a lot of these skills I lacked. And over time, I saw that I didn't have a lot of emotional intelligence in a process that is highly emotional.
Right.
um, I may have been quick to anger. I couldn't process in real time what I was feeling about what the IEP team may have said or recommended. And I couldn't say that I'm not feeling heard right now. right? So it came out as anger, but I wasn't really angry. I wanted to be heard, right? So these were things that I've learned over time that now I teach through my advocacy when I'm working with a parent of a student with disability. Okay, so, you know, your communication style, right? These are the things that are important when you are in an IEP meeting, right? This is a highly emotional process, so we have to be able to self-awareness, be able to understand our own emotions, what triggers you, right? And then once you know that, you can communicate that, right? And how to communicate it, right, to the IEP team. You know, when you said this, right, this is what I'm hearing, or this is how this made me feel, or this is how this came across. Moving forward in the meetings, this is what I would like to see. Right. So that's just one example of how my coaching, what I do in my business, overlaps with my advocacy when we're talking about advocacy for student parents or workforce development students, which is something else I'm really passionate about, because when you talk about workforce development and you talk about workforce development students, there's not a lot of pride around that, right? If you see a commercial about a college, you don't see a workforce development student in a college hoodie and
Right.
walking through the campus and things like that. So how can we close that gap, right? How can we close that gap with student parents to whereas you're cultivating healthy relationships with them, personal development, right? How do you have more empathy, right, for a situation that could be similar to mine? You have a student comes to you and say, my parent just got incarcerated, or I'm going through this, I'm going through that. You have to have a certain level of empathy. And in order to have a certain level of empathy, you have to have a certain level of emotional intelligence and a certain level of self-awareness. So really advocating, working with higher education institutions, like, you guys need to invest in personal development training for
Right.
your staff and your leadership, because if they don't have it, and they don't have that mindset, they can't create an environment. They can't give that. You can't give that to the students. And they're not going to feel comfortable with coming to you with these real life things that they're going through. And for a student, sometimes your institution may be their only safe space. So I know it was a little long winded, but that's how they overlap.
Yeah, you dropped a lot of gems in that. And I really like how you shared about the emotional intelligence and being able to verbalize and communicate effectively, because I feel like in my own personal experience being unheard, I've also been quick to anger when I was younger and I didn't know, hey, this is upsetting me. I didn't actually know how to verbalize that before. I had certain tools that I've learned over the years of working on myself and my own personal growth. I've now learned how to verbalize things, and I can see as I've grown how people respond differently, especially in emotionally charged things. Because in advocacy, I found sometimes I would say, "Oh, I'm sorry if I'm coming off a little aggressive." It's not that I'm actually aggressive, it's I'm so passionate. And sometimes my voice will get a little louder. I'll talk a little fast because I'm actually so passionate, but I would be fearful that that could be misinterpreted as aggression. So I would like preemptively apologize for that. And I think it's just really important to be self-aware, and you really dropped a lot of great knowledge there. So I wanted to see if there was any advice you would have as far as thinking back of on your personal journey in higher education and now with your personal development and coaching. What are some maybe tips or tools that helped you to be successful? I know we've talked about a lot of the advocacy and mentorship and things, but what are kind of like the top things that you could tell someone who's maybe a mom now and might be going through some of the scenarios we discussed, and how they could feel empowered or inspired to start that journey, to go back to school, to look at higher education as an option for them and feel supported?
So I would say, of course, my number one thing is always, always, always first. If Before I made any major decisions, I would definitely have invested in my personal development. It is what leads me. First things first, invest in your personal development, whatever that may look like, at whatever level you're in, because we all have different family dynamics. We have different things going on, different financial situations, and it may not for you at this moment look like hiring a coach. It could look like going to therapy. If that is, you know,
Right.
um, your thing. Everybody is not pro therapy. I am. It could look like sitting down, with the trusted advisor if you're in school or if you're thinking about going to school. It may look like sitting down with the trusted advisor. If you have a mentor, that's great. And just start to hash out what areas of your life do you feel that you need improvement or maybe hindering you? What is on your priority list right now? And starting with that. And the reason why I always go back to personal development is because who you are as a person is where it all starts, right? It takes a certain level of courage and vulnerability to do some of the things or the tips that I'm giving to you. And how do you build courage? How do you build resilience? How do you build vulnerability? And that starts with your personal development. Do it simultaneously. If you're starting off new in this journey, or if you're are older and you have some life experiences, start there, do it simultaneously. If you're a little bit ahead of the game and you do have a mentor, a trusted friend or family member, someone that can guide you, that has a little bit more experience, start building your support team. One of the worst things I ever did was try to do things on my own. I definitely at a point in my life had a fixed mindset, and I just I led with, I can do this on my own. I didn't need help. But that was also, and so this, again, why personal development is important, because as I started to invest in my own personal development and dug a little deeper into that mindset, it was attached to shame. I didn't want anybody to know what I was going through, and I didn't want to be judged. It was attached to shame and judgment.
Right.
It was attached to what I saw growing up, and so those unresolved things. So we want to tie up any loose ends and unresolved issues that may be hindering you or preventing you from taking that next step, whether it's going back to school or starting a business or going for a promotion on a job. You could be well into your career, and there could be something that's preventing you from going to, getting you from where you are to where you want to be. What is that? And if there's something deeper there, digging deeper into that. What is that about? What could that possibly be attached to, and tying up those loose ends? The next thing I'll say is ask the questions, ask all of the questions. I said earlier, I just ask, can you help me? Can you be my mentor? Because the worst thing that's going to happen is you'll be right where you are right now. Like it's not going to hurt you. It can only help you. And I want to say, I'll be honest with you, nobody's ever told me no.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And also, whatever time it is that you can get, if it's sometimes I talk to my mentors every few months. One of my mentors I speak with, I talk to every few months. But the wealth of knowledge that you're going to get, maybe it may be 20 minutes, but I don't have any pride about someone that is pouring into me or giving their time to me. So if it's 20 minutes that they have, I'll take it. You just got to know the right questions to ask. And then the last thing I'll say is that your voice matters. This in the world of advocacy, what I've learned is that this is not a race, this is a marathon. And I may not see the change in my lifetime, but I know that I was a part of it.
Wow.
So it's keep going every day. Every day, your voice matters. Your story matters. We talked earlier about, when you went in front of these elected officials and it was like they have never heard from a student before, or maybe sometimes like parents, when we have children and we become our big adult ages, we forget what it's like to be children, right? Because we're so much in adult mode, and sometimes you don't know how your story could bring a person back, and they say, "Oh, I remember being in college," because that has happened. I remember not having money for food in college. They get so high up that they forget. That's a real thing, right? Or you don't know that how your story could give someone else courage to do whatever it is that they wanted to do. I remember, just really short, and I'm gonna wrap it up.
Oh, you're
We had
fine.
the premiere for Real College Curriculum, and again, this just started with me saying yes. And yes, I was definitely nervous. I've never been a part of anything like this. And there was a young lady, I was leaving with my children, and there was a young lady, student at Montgomery College. She came to me and said, I just want to thank you for telling your story. She said, because when I left here today, I was going to leave college. It was just too hard. And that was just from me having the courage. And I introduced her to Dr. Jabet, and my story, or me having the courage to tell a little bit of my story, a snippet of my story, stopped someone from dropping out of college. Someone's always watching, someone's always listening, especially in the climate that we're in right now. The new administration, people are looking for hope, they're looking for leadership. They're looking for inspiration. They're looking for something to hold on to, and they're looking for someone. Representation matters. They're looking for individuals that look like them, that come from where they come from. They're looking for a tangible, physical manifestation of what's possible. Not what people show on social media, because you could be whoever you want to be on social media, but someone that she talks like me, she looks like me, she comes from where I come from, and she made it. This is possible. I didn't know that there were so many pathways to higher education. I didn't know that, you can go in as a non-degree student or a workforce development student and be very successful. I didn't know about skills training. I didn't know so many things were possible. And it's because I wasn't in an environment, or I wasn't around individuals who were telling their stories, who I could physically see, oh, okay, this is what's going on. I can do this. I can go down this route. These are the possibilities. I didn't see it. I didn't know that it was possible until later on in life. So I always think about, I want to be that individual, working with the youth, even, working with established adults to say, like, listen, this is possible. And you can see it through me.
That was so powerful. Yes, it's possible and you can see it through me. And I've oftentimes found that seeing other women, strong women, doing things that, like you said, I didn't know a lot of things were possible. I didn't know about all the different education. Higher education has evolved from just, oh, you need to go to get a degree, or we're way beyond that at this point. There's
Yeah.
certifications you can take. There's so much that you can do. I think it's also just like you mentioned about the environment, and oftentimes students that would benefit so greatly from things like a certification program or a scholarship, that information, unfortunately, it's tough to reach them with that. So I
Yeah.
do also hope that for the people who are listening, that you heard something today that might inspire you, or if you know someone that might be inspired by our conversation today, just share this episode and please go check out Alicia's website. I'll leave it in the episode description. And as we wrap up, was there any other advice or any other final thoughts that you wanted to share today with our listeners?
Don't give up. Don't give up. I think that should have been number one, but don't give up. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And the only time that you fail is when you give up. If you never give up, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And take your time, but don't give up. Invest in your personal development. Who you are as an individual is the foundation, is the catalyst. Who you are, all of you, right? We have these big, grand dreams, but we cannot do them if we're not mentally well, physically well, spiritually well, socially well. Like, we cannot do them if we're not focused on who we are as people, and that's going to precede you. I know we've heard the term, like, your appearance, but who you are, how you make people feel, right? How you make people feel, the mark that you leave on people, what they say about you when you leave out of a room, where they hear you, whether, that is what matters. And that, I'll be honest with you, that is what's going to get you in a lot of doors. That is what has gotten me in a lot of my opportunities. I want to say about 95% of my opportunities have been through being on top of mind, tip of tongue, because I'm very, and I've done some amazing things, and it's just beginning for me. I'm very young. I'm only 41. But what I'm most proud of is who I'm becoming as a woman. That is at the top of my list. It means so much to me. So again, like, just don't give up. If it's one thing that I don't want you to forget, and if it's one thing, if you connect with me, you get to know me, you'll know that I'm going to do everything that I said I was going to do. Might not have been in the timing that I want, but I never gave up, and it is going to happen.
This was such an awesome, inspiring conversation. I am actually going to go look into my own personal development. There were some things you mentioned where I'm like, okay, I might need to take a look at some things for myself. So thank you so much for giving your voice to this platform. I've really enjoyed getting to hear your story, and I just wanted to thank you again so much for taking time to be a part of this podcast. And for our listeners, I'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you so much for having me.
If something in this episode moved you or resonated with you, don't be afraid to use your voice or step into your purpose. And if you want to be part of this conversation or have a story to tell, I want to hear it. You can email me at free.ishpodcast@gmail.com. That's free.ishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also DM me on Instagram at free.ishpodcast. We're free-ish, and we're claiming our space unapologetically.